In today's video, we're going to be talking about an Apple product that is so cheap that it makes you wonder why Apple even sells it at all. I am, of course, talking about the base model 10.2-inch iPad. Apple has been selling this thing for a couple of years now, and honestly, I can't quite tell why. Let's talk about it. So here it is. This is the 10.2-inch base model iPad. I went for it in the completely cheapest bone stock specification. So that's Wi-Fi only, 64 gigabytes of storage. Now that's actually one of the biggest points of interest with this particular iPad. The fact that it has 64 gigabytes instead of 32 pretty much resolves the only reservation that I had about last year's base model iPad, which, by the way, you can still buy refurbished for $270. That is an unbelievably cheap price for last year's iPad, which is still very good apart from, as I mentioned, the 32 gigabyte of storage. This particular one at $330 with 64 gigabytes, space gray, Wi-Fi only. This thing seems like a pretty incredible deal. Almost, I might say, too good to be true, to the point where it's going to be cannibalizing other iPads. So what do I mean by that? Well, to find out, let's get this thing unboxed. Unlike the iPhones this year, we still have pesky plastic wrap around the bottom of this particular iPad, but that's okay because we can make quick work of it. And let's go ahead and take it out of the box. Well, it may only be $330, but you're not sacrificing the Apple unboxing experience. And as with the iPad mini that we unboxed pretty recently, this is now a paper wrap instead of using plastic, so that is really good to see. As far as what else we get, obviously this is the base model iPad, so we're still on Lightning, but we do at least get a USB-C power brick in the box, and it should be the same one as the iPad mini, yep, 20 watts. We've got our usual documentation, our Apple stickers, etc. Nobody really cares about that anymore. The Apple unboxing experience is very simple, very minimal. So let's go ahead and take this off here. Look at that. I went for space gray on this iPad because I feel like the silver is just a little bit too boring. Wow, I've been using the iPad mini for a couple of days, and this is definitely a lot bigger than that. It's not exactly a one-handable device. Okay, I can kind of get my thumb and my pinky around it a little bit. So here we have it. This is the new iPad for this year. Let's power it on. Now, obviously, we haven't changed anything about the design. There were some rumors that going into this year, the iPad base model would be adopting the old iPad Air's design language. So the only real difference is a 10.5-inch display instead of 10.2, slightly thinner bezels as a result of that, as well as the thinner case design with a camera bump. But alas, that is not the case. We have the same unchanged design that we've been using for several years now. Good old Touch ID and the home button. It's been a while. So now that I've got this thing all set up, I want to talk about why I think it's so weird that Apple even sells this thing in the first place, right? It's kind of weird nonetheless to have a fully fledged iPad that runs iPadOS, the same iPadOS that you would get if you spend $1,100 on an iPad Pro, and it's $330. Now, I'm not complaining, okay? You know, like this is a great product. And yeah, I do wish that it had been updated in terms of its design just a little bit. But even though it's a little bit dated looking, I mean, it's an A13 chip. We've got Center Stage, which is literally directly from the iPad Pros. I mean, those are $800, $1,000, $1,500 tablets. And they were just like, oh yeah, we'll just put it in here as well. The back camera's the same. They could have left the front camera the same too, and nobody would have really said anything. Nobody would have said anything if they kept using an A12. Nobody would have said anything if they didn't put True Tone on here. If they had just kept the same exact iPad as last year and just doubled the standard storage to 64 gigabytes, I would still be sitting here saying that's a pretty good deal. That's worth it. But they didn't. They upgraded it. This thing is basically the iPad version of the iPhone SE, but it gets updated much more than the iPhone SE, which is peculiar. So why is Apple putting so much attention into this iPad? Does it sell really well? Well, you'd have to assume if they're upgrading it and putting these new features in it, you'd have to assume that there's decent profit margins and that people are actually buying it. You know what? Maybe it's the accessories. This thing has Apple Pencil support, the old Apple Pencil that charges like a unicorn horn through lightning, which is weird, but whatever. I guess that's the byproduct of the old design. So you can use that. You can use the Smart Folio keyboard case thing, for which they charge $160. Or if you're like me, you can just buy one for 40 bucks on eBay and it works perfectly fine. You can use this thing on everything from a brand new iPad all the way back to several years ago. You can also use it with the 10.5-inch iPad Pro, which came out in 2017. Like, this thing has a lot of compatibility, and as such, it's been out for a while, and you can find them really, really cheap like I did. So this keyboard case plus a $330 iPad, we're talking about $380 for this setup here. That's pretty ridiculous value for the money, if you ask me. $380, boom, you are all set up with a brand new under warranty device with a keyboard, with, all of the iPadOS features that you could want. You get center stage on here for FaceTime calls. Like, this is an unbelievably good deal. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm completely just simping for this iPad, even though I kind of am a little bit. There are still some drawbacks. So, for example, this is the 10.5-inch iPad Pro. That thing came out back in 2017. So this is a almost 5-year-old product, and this is a brand new product. However, there are some pretty distinct advantages to this guy. For one, you can already tell we've got thinner bezels, a larger display, and I think it's actually slightly shorter. No, maybe it's about the same, but it looks smaller because we have thinner bezels. This thing also has ProMotion, which is really, really nice to have, and it's a much thinner design. We have a laminated display on this guy, and you can see when I put them next to each other, you can kind of see how much thinner the previous iPad is. Now, this is the same exact design that was used on the iPad Air until last year. Basically, when the 11-inch iPad Pro came out, this design, they dropped ProMotion, put an A12 in it, and that was the iPad Air. That's basically what you're looking at here. But this particular one is, I really wish that they would take this exact chassis and use it for the base model iPad. Okay, yeah, maybe ProMotion is a bit of a pipe dream, but I really wish that there was a modernized version of this exact product. Now, this particular iPad would actually cost about the same as one of these new ones. So you might say, well, why not just go for that? Problem is, though, this thing has an A10X in it. I don't think that's a good long-term investment. If you're gonna spend $330 on the iPad, you might as well get one that's brand new with a warranty with an A13 that you're gonna be able to use for like years and years to come. Another thing you have to consider is that these things simply do not depreciate. And they're routinely selling for, look, $265, $300, $310. People are buying these iPads used for the same price that you can get them new with deals at like Best Buy and Micro Center. And what that means is if you buy this right now for $330, and a year from now, you decide that you want to upgrade to a more powerful iPad, maybe you want to go for an iPad Pro or something like that, you can sell this thing for like $50 less than what you paid for it. This thing could cost you $50 to own for a year. I am struggling to find anything wrong with this product. Seriously. And that's really rare for an Apple product because usually I like Apple products. I mean, they don't really release stuff that's just utter garbage, but sometimes there's things like, oh, well, it's good, but it's so expensive, or, well, there's some caveats if you don't go for the higher end model, but there's really nothing wrong with this at all. I mean, yes, there's the design. It's dated. I get that. But for $300, I really don't care. It doesn't look that great, you know? We got pretty chunky bezels. The display's not laminated, so you can kind of see that there's some space between the glass. But hey, you know what? It makes it easier to replace the screen if you crack it. So this thing has all of the same parts that iPads have used for years, which means it's really cheap to repair it yourself if you break it. I mean, even the things that are bad about it, the design, are kind of positives because in terms of repair, It makes things easier and cheaper. This is Apple. Why would they release such a good product at this price point when what they really want you to do is spend more money, more money. They want you to buy more things, accessories, add a lot of stuff to it, make it so that you're ending up spending $1,000, $1,500 on your iPad setup. But with the base model, you don't have to do any of that. Forget all of this. Just buy yourself a base model, buy yourself a used keyboard case for $40. You're done. And with all of that stuff, once we've added $40 for this keyboard case to really unlock all that iPadOS has to offer, it makes you wonder, isn't this a better device for iPadOS? A cheap sub $400 setup makes a lot more sense for iPadOS than a $1,400 12.9-inch iPad Pro. At that price, I'm starting to think like, okay, well, I need more functionality from this. I've got an M1 chip. I spent $1,400, mini LED display. Why can't iPadOS do more? But at this price, compared to a sub $400 Mac that you could buy, I think this might even be more useful. Now, I'm not just gonna wonder this out loud, of course, you guys know me. So I went on eBay and I bought a sub $400 MacBook. And when it arrives, we're gonna do a comparison. I'm gonna see, is it worth buying the base model iPad instead of a cheap Mac? So make sure you're subscribed because I think that's gonna be a really interesting video. So that's gonna do it for today. Make sure to stick around for that video, but my goodness, this iPad is simply the best value that you can get from Apple right now. It's just unbelievable that they sell this thing and that they give it as many updates as they do. If you've got a hypothesis as to why Apple keeps juicing up this iPad, let me know in the comments below. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video.